two late entries into the Democratic presidential primary, many Americans, including myself, are asking why now? According to recent polling, a majority of the voters seem to be satisfied with the options they have.
Also, why at all? But former Massachusetts Governor Deval Patrick says he is the man for the job.
Never once have I taken an assignment where I left my conscience at the door. And in my experience, confidence in my values alongside an openness to working with others is the formula for change that lasts. That's why I'm running for president.
But there are critics who say that Patrick has a history of yielding to others, especially whenever it benefited him. So according to Aaron Glantz, senior reporter at Reveal and author of the book Homewreckers, the presidential hopeful was part of a small gang of money men who cashed in when the economy tanked. And he joins us now via Skype to expand on this and to discuss the impact affordable housing could have on the election. Aaron, it's always great to speak to you.
Good to be back.
Absolutely. So, Aaron, tell us a little bit about Deval Patrick and your investigation of his role in the housing crisis.
Well, when I was writing the book Homewreckers, I was asking this question: who benefited when 8 million Americans lost their homes? And the answer to that was people like Steve Mnuchin, Wilbur Ross, affiliates of Donald Trump, who came in and scooped up all of these homes or foreclosed on those homes and made a big profit. But that kind of profiteering would not have been possible if it weren't for men like Deval Patrick. Patrick was on the board of this company called Ameriquest from 2004 to 2006. And this was named one of the worst subprime lenders in America by the Treasury Department. This is a bank that had to pay a $325 million settlement for outright fraud. We're talking about employees of this lender putting the loan documents of prospective borrowers up on Coke machines with the glow on the back and tracing the signatures of people. They were so obsessed with, kind of getting their mark, selling this bad loan, that they stooped to that level.
And so what really specifically was their role in the crisis, and how did Patrick's tenure sort of overlap with their worst behavior?
Well, this Ameriquest was the largest subprime lender. So subprime loans are the loans that are basically bad, as opposed to prime loans, and also often given to people with less than stellar credit. And a lot of times the about these subprime loans is that they were given to people who should have, quote unquote, never been homeowners. But Ameriquest, which, you may have forgotten about them now, but they were huge during the bubble. They owned the naming rights to the stadium where the Texas Rangers play. It was Ameriquest Stadium. They had a blimp. They were huge. And the way they made their money was through refinancing. 93% of their loans were refinances. So they took people who already owned their home, often African Americans, and they got them into these new mortgage products that weren't the kind of standard mortgage products they had before, but would be the type with like a balloon payment or an interest rate that would start low and then jump up really high. And so then when housing values stopped going up, when they started to stabilize, or even go down, and people couldn't refinance, they lost their homes in tremendous numbers.
Mm-hmm. And so, can you talk specifically, Patrick's role on this was as a board member, and did he facilitate this behavior? So he was very much aware of this behavior, right, Aaron?
Well, he was on top of it all, right? I mean, he was the guy who's sitting in the suites, right, where all of this is going on the ground level. And the people at the top, like Patrick, were very well aware of this because, as I mentioned, there were multiple legal cases against this bank. Eventually, 49 states' attorneys general sued, alleging fraud. The bank had to pay a $325 million settlement, and then it shut down. And Patrick was intimately involved in all of that. And I saw in the clip that you played earlier, he's saying, well, he never checked his conscience at the door. And his explanation for all of this was like, he was the guy who was making this all right after it had all gone wrong. But this was a bank that continued that same behavior all through Patrick's tenure until the bank's, until he left shortly before the bank collapsed. And the reason he left was because he was elected governor of Massachusetts.
And what is the human cost of all of this?
I mean, we're talking about a tremendous human cost. We start at the beginning, about 8 million Americans losing their homes in the financial crisis. And many, many banks took part, but no banks were more important than these subprime lenders, lenders like Countrywide and IndyMac, which Steve Mnuchin ended up buying and rebranding OneWest, and Ameriquest, which was the biggest maker of these subprime loans that caused people to lose their wealth, lose their equity, and not have anything to pass on to their children. And, I think that what I've written now, it just kind of scratches the surface, pointing out that Deval Patrick is highly involved in all of this. I should also mention that when President George W. Bush appointed the head of Ameriquest, a billionaire named Robert Arnall, to be an ambassador, Patrick stuck up with him. He called him a good man in a letter that went to the leaders of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, including Joe Biden, his now Democratic rival for president. So, even as he's trying to sing on one hand, well, I was trying to make things right of this kind of predatory bank, trying to set them off on the right course, he's also sticking up for the head of this company, the founder of this company, when W puts him up for an ambassadorship.
Right. Great point, Aaron. And what you outlined earlier is we've talked about it on the show about how Wall Street donors basically looked at Deval Patrick and said, hey, this is a way where we can get a guy with Wall Street interests at heart in order to appeal to the black community. But what you're laying out here, Aaron, is that subprime mortgages and a lot of this this predatory lending behavior very much disproportionately affected the black community during the crisis. Isn't that right?
Well, you're looking at an African-American homeowners rate in this country, which has fallen to levels not seen since the Jim Crow era. You're looking at a white-black wealth gap in this country where the average white family, for every dollar the average white family has, the average black family has a dime. And a great proportion of African-American families, because they've lost their home, are literally worth nothing and have only debt to pass on to their children. And that is because of the historic dispossession of the African-American community that occurred during the financial crisis. And, Ameriquest was by no means the only financial institution that was perpetrating this on people of color during the boom years and then into the bust, but it was one of the worst. And that's not according to me, that's according to the Treasury Department.
Wow.
What does it say about the Democratic Party that two prominent candidates for president in the Democratic primary show up as wrongdoers in your book about the housing crisis?
I think that we have a real split in the Democratic Party, just like in the Republican Party. You have people like Elizabeth Warren, who was there with the creation of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, who has a very aggressive plan for investing in redline communities. You have Bernie Sanders, you have Cory Booker, you have Pete Buttigieg, all of them putting forward really aggressive housing plans right now. Then you have people like Kamala Harris, who, as Attorney General of California, talked a good game but failed to prosecute Steve Mnuchin's bank. You have Deval Patrick, who served on the board of Ameriquest. And, you have Julian Castro, who is kind of on the fringes of the race, but he was the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development during a time when HUD, frankly, did a lot of things that advantaged Wall Street at the expense of homeowners who were just trying desperately to hang on to their property. Democratic Party, Democratic voters, they have a lot of choice on this issue as the primaries get underway. And I'm just trying to bring some of the details to light of some of the candidates.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Aaron. Really, really great analysis. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Aaron.
Okay.
And we'll have more Rising after this.